Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different, as I'm going to be doing a playthrough of the Alchemy Laboratory section of the PlayStation version of Castlevania Symphony of the Night. For those new to the channel, I'm currently developing a Sega Genesis / Megadrive version of the game, and it's going to be more in the vein of the 16-bit Castlevania games, so more of a linear action platformer like the Super Nintendo Super Castlevania 4 or Rondo of Blood or Castlevania Bloodlines. So this isn't really going to be your usual traditional playthrough of the game, it's rather going to be a discussion of the level design and how we're going to have to change the design of the castle to make it more suitable to be a traditional 16-bit Castlevania action game. And also we're going to be looking at the enemy AI, also the boss AI, and also be taking a look at some of the aspects, especially the graphical aspects, that might make it quite challenging to do the port to the Megadrive. Now this very first section is one that we actually have already got into the game, the Megadrive version, and I think Pyron's done a really great job with the graphics here. But what we haven't got in place so far are the enemies. Now one of the things we have to take the most care about when doing the Megadrive version of the game is the colour palette. So in the PlayStation you got a huge number of colours, but for the Megadrive we only have 64 divided into 4 palettes of 16 colours. Now we've got 2 for the background, so 2 times 16 for the backgrounds, normally 1 times 16 for Alucard, and that leaves 1 palette of 16 colours for the enemies. Speaking of enemies, this one here is a bit of a coward, and oh, there's another one now. And I didn't really know this until I was just really analysing the game, but they really back off. Even if you turn your back to them, they still don't dare come close to you. So they're not the most brave enemy in the game. I almost feel sorry for attacking them, and I think Alucard's sword, even a short sword, has a much greater reach than their sword, so they're pretty easy pickings. The sword we're currently using for the Megadrive version of the game for Alucard's even longer, so we're going to have to be careful with that in terms of the game difficulty. If the sword's too big, it might make the game a bit too easy, especially against these kind of very lower enemies. For the Megadrive version of the game, I hope to include as much of the destructible scenery as I can, because I think it's a really nice aspect of the Alchemy Lab level, having all these flasks and so on that you can hit and they leak out and you get some special item from them. When taking a close look at this enemy, you'll notice that its AI is very simple. It seems to be on a set pattern where it just walks back and forth. It doesn't really seem to react to the player too much, and I don't think this will be very hard to program. It just walks back and forth along the pillar, and if it walks into Alucard, it walks into them, but it doesn't really care so much. But I like this enemy very much. I like the sound as he falls to the floor, the bones kind of falling to the floor, and where he gets back up again. I think I have some interesting ideas how we may have this enemy to be more of a challenge in terms of the level design, but I'll save that until later. I've got some ideas on how to include these spikes into the game. So in the PlayStation version we have these spikes and switches, and I have some ideas of how we can use that so that maybe the enemies are walking over the switches that causes the spikes to rise up every now and again, and as Alucard you have to avoid it. It could be quite fun. And in terms of some of the extra items, for example the shield here, I'm not sure if it's going to be in the end game. We have to think about the challenge. Maybe having the shield will make some projectile enemies quite easy, if you can block their projectiles just by holding the shield up. There's also the question of how many buttons we have for the Megadrive version. Obviously we can use the 6-button joypad, okay, but on the 3-button one we've probably got C for jump, B for attack, up and B for the sub weapons, and maybe A for the backdash, so that's something we have to think about as well. I don't think we're going to need any save points for our platform game, our platform version of the game, but this is such an iconic part of Castlevania Symphony of the Night that I want to be able to include the cube somehow. Obviously we can't use polygons, but I think we can maybe use some sprite animations for that one. Whenever I get to this part, I always try to make it so I can get the skeleton below to kind of die onto the switch, so you can take me up into that area straight away. I don't think it's possible, but I'll keep trying. It gave me an idea for the Megadrive version. Maybe we could do it so we have 2 skeletons walking where the switch is, and we have an elevator going up to a place that you can't jump to, but if you time it so that you kill the skeletons at the right time, and then they'll eventually walk on to the switch one after the other. Then that will make the elevator go up just enough for you to jump and maybe get some kind of secret item or something. Probably my favourite regular enemy of the Alchemy Lab section is this guy here, this green axe thrower. I think it's a pretty cool enemy. It's pretty challenging for an early level enemy, but on the other hand, you can actually hit the projectiles as long as you time it correctly, which is easier said than done. So I'm really looking forward to coding this one. I think I won't make any changes to the AI of this enemy because I think it's a pretty cool enemy to begin with, and I think the challenge is just right for level 2 of our game. With regards to the money you collect throughout the game, I was recently playing the Streets of Rage remake game. So Streets of Rage, it got a PC remake where you can play the game and you collect money as you play the game, and once you finish the game you go into a shop and you can buy extra items and outfits for the characters. And I thought that might be a good idea for our Symphony of the Night game, where the money you collect is saved somehow, and then you can just spend that money after you finish the game and you can buy maybe weapons or different outfits. It could be a cool little idea. At the moment we don't have this downward sword thrust which allowed us to get into this area of the game. I'm not sure if we're going to include that in the game, the downward sword thrust, because it's not very useful apart from getting into some of these secret areas. We may have the dragon kick, which is I think it's called a dragon kick, which is more of like a downward kick where you could get to that kind of area. Obviously when it comes to secret areas I'm going to have some in the game, but I'm not sure if they're going to be in the same place. Maybe I'll mix them up a bit to make a bit more of a challenge for other players. And I hope you didn't think I was going to forget this this one at the side here. I know lots of people were probably saying, oh, you've forgotten the side exit, the extra capacity heart, but as you can see I've got it here. For areas like this where there aren't any enemies, it's just kind of platforming, I think it's kind of suitable for a Metroidvania type game to give you a bit of a breather, but for a platformer I think it's a bit odd not to have any enemies in a certain space, so we're probably going to change that around a bit. Speaking of enemies, well, see, I'm just toying with this one here. Now this one is pretty aggressive, unlike the other skeleton. He's pretty brave. I like the way he kind of jumps up and down, and the way he throws the bones is actually pretty intelligent. He judges where you are and he'll throw the bones. How far he throws the bones will be adjusted according to how far away you are from him. So that's going to be a bit more of a coding challenge, but I don't think it's going to be too difficult to program in. Speaking of challenges, it's going to be quite difficult to get this particular enemy into the game, because you can see the way he turns around the corners is almost like a scaling rotation effect, I think. So I think what I'm going to have to do is take a lot of screenshots as he goes around the corner and do it as a sprite animation, because to do unless we can use the Mega CD on a regular Mega Drive to have this kind of scaling, this rotation is quite difficult, quite taxing on the hardware. I quite like this puzzle aspect here we have with the boxes and the spikes that allows you to get onto the slightly higher area. If you have any ideas of how we could potentially use this in the Mega Drive version, maybe we could use it so you can get to an area where you can get maybe an extra weapon, or maybe you have an alternative route through the level if you manage to do this, maybe a better route through the level. I think it's quite a good way to mix things up a bit, and I think I might take a look at what I can use it for, the heavy little puzzles, but I don't want to go too puzzle heavy because it's just going to be more of an action platform game. So we're taking a bit of a detour here to pick up an extra item. I'm going to have secret rooms in the game, but I don't think I'm going to have these really big detours like we're taking now of a couple of rooms, but we'll see what we can do in terms of the extra items and how many we can include. I'm not sure how many there are in the original game. I think there are hundreds of swords and weapons and shields and different kinds of objects that you can pick up throughout the castle, so we obviously can't have quite so many as the original game, but I'd like to include a handful if I can. Now let's talk a second about the VRAM requirements. So especially with this 32-bit game, often they have lots of unique tiles that they use throughout the backgrounds and foregrounds, but for this section, for the Alchemy Lab, is actually not so bad. You can see that the foreground has these what would you call them, almost like brickwork, and the brickwork is pretty, there's lots of repeating brickwork even in the PlayStation version here. So I don't think we have to reduce the brickwork, we don't have to simplify it too much like we do maybe some other backgrounds, and even the far background here is not too complex. There's a lot of repeating patterns there too. For anyone who watched one of the previous videos I did, you see that for the boss stage of this area, the Alchemy Lab, we did have to simplify the pentagram a little bit that appeared in the back. We had to make it so it's symmetrical because it really wasn't fitting into VRAM, it's just completely overflowing it. But for most of the sections here, I'm pretty sure we can pretty much have it not an exact match, but very, very close to the PlayStation original. And you probably notice I got deliberately poisoned here just to show what's happening with the poison, and it just seems that it reduces your attack ability to pretty much zero. And I think poison is something maybe we won't, that's one of the RPG elements they added to this game, but maybe it's not so suitable for an action platformer Castlevania, because then we need another item to get rid of the poison, and I'm not sure it quite suits a linear game. So for those skeletons that go round and round the platforms, I think when they drop it almost looks like acid. I think it'll just maybe just hurt Alucard a bit, just take away some health rather than poisoning him. I've been playing through Bloodstained Ritual of the Night recently, and it's my first ever playthrough. I didn't have time to play it before. I think I'm about 2/3 of the way through, and it's interesting to be playing that at the same time I'm designing this Megadrive version of Castlevania Symphony of the Night, because obviously it's considered by many people to be a spiritual sequel to the PlayStation original. You can see that they did things in that game, such as having a special door when you're about to go into a boss fight, just to give you a bit of warning and a bit of a heads up. But I quite like the way they do it in the original Symphony of the Night. It's a bit more of a surprise. Maybe you kind of mess up a bit, you don't really prepare it as a result, and you end up having to go back to a save state when you lose to the boss. But I actually quite like the way the door just closes behind you and you've just been ambushed almost. It makes it quite exciting, you don't know what's going to come up next. This can be a bit of an easy and boring fight if you don't let the spear boss get to the ground and really show off his attacks, so I'll just give him a chance here just to attack me in a normal way. It's a lot easier when you've got the shield, which we probably won't have in the Mega Drive version, and he's still gone down pretty easy. Someone mentioned that he appears in the Super Nintendo Super Castlevania 4 too. I haven't played that game in a long time, but I'm going to replay it again soon, because I think that's a good example of a 16-bit action Castlevania, and so I might include some of these attack patterns from that game, but I don't want to make this too hard because it's just the second level boss and you do have two bosses to fight at the same time, so I don't want to make this boss fight super hard. But on the other hand, I think this version of the boss here is maybe a little bit too easy, especially if you have the axe sub weapon, which the game designers very kindly give to you at just before you go into the boss fight. As I mentioned before, this is one area of the Alchemy Lab where we do have to change the graphics a fair bit because the pentagrams are just a little bit too complex for the Mega Drive. Areas like this are much easier because you can see it's just the same brickwork repeated over and over again, and even in terms of the background layer, so some outside areas are very difficult because they might have 3 or 4 different scrolling background areas, which is quite hard to do on the Mega Drive or to emulate on the Mega Drive. But for these indoor areas, mostly they only have 2 layers of scrolling, so I think the effects is really nice, and I think it's a very good looking level, but it's definitely a level that's easier to do on the Mega Drive than many of the outside levels we're going to have to do later. Now this here is a very interesting section that I think has a lot of potential for an action style game. Right now there aren't any enemies, it's more of a maybe just shortly after the boss fights, it's just a nice relaxing stroll and just to go down in the elevator and pick up some items and so on. We're going to pick up some sunglasses here, but for our game I think it might be a good idea if we can maybe make it a bit more tense, so we can maybe include those axe throwing guys on either side of the elevator, so as you're going down you either have to hit the axes or you have to jump and dodge them out of the way. Obviously the actual elevator is quite narrow, it's not very wide, so you don't have a lot of movement. But if these areas here, which are currently blocked off, if each of them have an enemy that maybe attacks you, then you can attack either side, then I think that could be a pretty cool idea. After all, the Mega Drive is quite big on having elevator stages, so I think it'd be quite fun. As for this cannon, I did have an idea of maybe having it in the where the boss fight is, and maybe you can fire it off once, so maybe you can one hit one of the bosses if you time it correctly. That could be quite a fun idea. I always thought of one of those boss fights in the Super Metroid game on the Super Nintendo, where it's not a one-hit death for the boss, but there's a boss that grabs you, and if you hook onto, there's some kind of electrical socket, you can electrocute the boss. And I thought it was just a really fun alternative way just to do a boss fight. So you have the regular, you can just keep hitting them, but there's a clever way of doing it too. But I'm not sure, that might be a bit complex to do here. I'm not sure if anyone thinks that's a good idea, or whether it's better to just keep hitting the boss with your sword. So in the Mega Drive version, being more of a linear platform game, we won't be going back and forth like this, and there won't be any backtracking, so the elevator will either just go up or just go down, and you'll defeat the enemies on either side as it goes up automatically, and that will be it. But hopefully I can do something fun with this part of the game. I really like the Alchemy Laboratory part of the castle. I think the artwork's very nice. I like being in these small, more claustrophobic passages and then out into these larger halls. Now here we have the bloody zombie enemy that we had in the entrance part of the castle too. The AI is a bit more sophisticated here. Normally he'll kind of, if he sees you, he'll suddenly speed up and he'll go for you and he'll try and hit you, but his range is pretty limited too. You saw there his death animation, which I did have in that first level beta of the first level of the Mega Drive game, but I think there the animation I did was way too slow. You can see he died a lot quicker there. The animation moved at a lot quicker pace, and so when I come to redo him for the Alchemy Lab level, I definitely quicken up his death animation because he's a bit too slow otherwise. I can't recall right now just how many animations that death animation had in the PlayStation original. I think it's something ridiculous, like 50. I think they really went overkill with that. And so for the Mega Drive one, I think the one I had in that first level beta test was, I think there was like 25, but I'm not sure how many animation frames the actual end result one would have. It's probably a bit over the top to have more than 20, but we'll see if we can fit it in. Then I'll put it in. I hope to start adding in sub-weapons at some point in the not too distant future. When I'm playing Castlevania games myself, I normally keep hold of the axe because I think it has a very good arc of attack that you don't normally have. But this one here is very interesting. I think it'd be very tricky from a coding point of view because of the way it has its own physics, and especially in the previous room with all these angled floors and walls, it's really pretty unpredictable, so that might be quite tough. I'm not sure if this particular one will be included or not. The axe certainly, the knife, the holy water and the regular ones. This one's quite useful though. I think it'd be a fun coding challenge to see if I can put it in there and just see if my code that I write for it would stress the old CPU too much, because the Mega Drive CPU is pretty strong. Hopefully it won't have any slowdown, but we'll have to see. I really like this part in particular of this room. I like how it's very claustrophobic. You don't really have much room to jump or move out the way, and yet you have these skeletons just coming towards you at quite a fast pace. Normally you only have a chance to hit them once, and you have to move back and hit them again. You can't just stand in your place and hit them twice in quick succession. Then you have it mixed in with these axe guys too. So I think maybe in the Mega Drive version for this particular room, I like this little claustrophobic part you're seeing now, this little very tight corridor, but instead of having it 2 levels higher, maybe I have it 4, 5 or 6 levels higher and have more skeleton enemies. So there's only level 2 of the game, so I don't want to make it too difficult. I don't want to make it into a death trap, but I think that'll be a fun little a little bit of level design there. Okay, so you've already listened to me waffle on for almost 20 minutes now about how we could potentially redesign the Alchemy Lab level for our Mega Drive game here. Now it's time to share your ideas of what we could do with the level, so let me know what kind of level gimmicks you might want to include in terms of having the elevators and cannons and spikes and so on. Let me know how you think the level should be designed, what kind of fun challenges we could give the player. Nothing too difficult because it is just level 2, so I don't want to do any bottomless death pits or anything. Just something more difficult than level 1, starting to ease the player into the game. I'm really looking forward to seeing what kind of ideas everyone comes up with. But that's it for this video. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.
Farewell.